Earth had always believed it was safe, a small blue dot in the vast expanse of space, a place where humanity could grow and thrive without the threat of otherworldly destruction. But all of that changed in an instant. The skies above were torn apart as the Zarnax Empire made its appearance, their massive ships darkening the heavens, their weapons capable of erasing entire cities. With a single strike, humanity's defense systems, which had once been a symbol of pride, were powerless against this onslaught. The Zarnax were unstoppable, an ancient race with technology far beyond anything Earth had ever seen. Their fleets descended in waves, crushing resistance from every corner of the world. Admiral Alex Turner stood on the bridge of the Vanguard, the pride of Earth's military fleet, his eyes fixed on the viewscreen before him. The massive ships of the Zarnax Empire loomed in the distance, their dark shapes intimidating and cold like shadows of death stretching across the stars. Turner's face was a mask of resolve, but beneath it all he felt the weight of humanity's survival pressing down on him like 1,000 tons of steel. There was no escape from this fight, no way out, only the desperate hope that somehow they could survive this nightmare. "Captain Turner, we have incoming." Commander Emily Hayes' voice was steady, but there was a hint of fear beneath the surface. Her hands flew over the control panel as the Vanguard rocked with the force of enemy fire. The ship shields flickered dangerously as the Zarnax ships closed in. The massive alien warships were unlike anything Earth had ever encountered, their hulls nearly impervious to laser fire, their weapons capable of ripping through steel like paper. "We can't fight them off with conventional weapons," Hayes said, turning to Turner, her voice laced with urgency. "I know," Turner replied, his voice calm yet filled with a quiet anger. "We need to get close. We need to disable their flagship before they can bring the full force of their fleet to bear on us." Hayes nodded, her expression hardening. "It's a suicide mission, sir." "I know," Turner repeated, the weight of the decision settling on him with the crushing force of inevitability. The crew of the Vanguard had always known that this day could come, that they might be called to make the ultimate sacrifice for the survival of Earth. But now that the moment had arrived, it felt different. The terror of facing an enemy so powerful was unlike anything they had ever imagined. "Prepare the ship for battle," Turner commanded, his voice firm as steel. "This is the last stand of humanity." The crew worked in a blur of motion as the Vanguard moved into position. The weapons systems powered up, the shields reinforced, but Turner knew it wouldn't be enough against such overwhelming force. The Zarnax were too powerful, their numbers too great, and Earth's defenses had already been shattered. As the first wave of enemy ships closed in on them, Turner felt the weight of every life on Earth hanging in the balance. This was at the moment they had all been preparing for, and yet nothing could have prepared them for the scale of the disaster before them. "Give them hell," Turner muttered under his breath as he prepared for the battle that would determine humanity's fate. The Vanguard was humanity's last hope, its engines roaring to life as it surged forward into the vast black expanse of space, a single gleaming beacon of defiance in a universe that seemed to be swallowing them whole. Turner stood at the helm, his hands gripping the controls as the ship shook under the pressure of the incoming barrage from the Zarnax fleet. The crew had been trained for moments like this, but nothing could prepare them for the magnitude of the attack that came crashing down on them. "Shields holding at 40%. Hayes called out from her station, her fingers dancing across the console as alarms blared around them. The entire ship felt like it was coming apart at the seams. "Not good enough," Turner said, his eyes narrowed as he scanned the approaching enemy ships. "Give me everything we got." The Vanguard shuddered again, this time a direct hit to the starboard side, the impact rattling the entire ship. The lights flickered for a moment before returning to their usual dull hum, and Turner's gaze flicked to the viewscreen where the enemy ships were closing in from all directions. The Zarnax fleet wasn't just large, it was massive, an unstoppable force that seemed to bend space itself as it swarmed toward them. Turner's heart pounded in his chest. The odds were stacked against them, and the crew of the Vanguard knew that if they didn't act fast, the entire fleet would be wiped out in a matter of hours, if not minutes. "Commander Hayes, how much longer until we reach their flagship?" 5 minutes at most, she replied, her voice steady, but laced with an edge of desperation. But sir, at that range we won't last long even with full evasive maneuvers. Turner clenched his jaw. He knew that the chances of making it to the Zarnak's flagship and launching an attack were slim to none, but it was the only option they had left. The Vanguard was the most advanced warship humanity had ever built, and yet it was nothing compared to the might of the Zarnak's fleet. This was their final chance to strike before Earth's defenses crumbled entirely. All hands brace for impact, Turner ordered as another wave of fire hammered their shields. This time, the energy was so powerful that it sent the Vanguard tumbling off course. The crew flocked to regain control of the ship as it spun through space like a lost satellite. Get us back on track now. Working on it, sir, Hayes shouted as her fingers flew over the controls. We're losing power to the aft thrusters. We'll have to compensate with forward momentum, but it's going to take a few seconds. Do it, Turner commanded, his eyes locked on the growing Zarnak's flagship ahead of them. It was a massive structure, a jagged silhouette against the stars, its surface dark and foreboding like an iron fortress floating in the void of space. The Vanguard was already damaged beyond repair, and if they didn't destroy the flagship in the next few minutes, Earth was lost. Give me everything you've got, Lieutenant Turner called out to the weapons officer, a young officer named Leo Martins, who had only recently been promoted to the position. Fire everything we have. Firing now, sir, Martins replied as the ship's weapon systems came online, and a barrage of energy blasts shot toward the massive Zarnak ship. But as the weapons tore through the void, something unexpected happened. The Zarnak's flagship didn't explode or even flinch. Instead, it fired back with a vengeance, sending a massive beam of concentrated energy that struck the Vanguard head-on and sent the ship reeling into the dark abyss of space. The Vanguard was tossed like a ragdoll through the empty void of space. The blast sent waves of heat through the hull as the ship veered off course, its systems failing one by one. The control panels flickered out of life, and the emergency lights bathed the bridge in a dim red glow. Commander Hayes scrambled to regain control as the ship spun wildly out of control. Status report. Turner shouted, his voice hoarse from the shock of the impact. Shields are gone, Hayes said through gritted teeth, her hands flying over the unresponsive controls. We're venting atmosphere on Deck 3 and engines are at 15%. Firepower? Turner asked, his eyes fixed on the Zarnak's flagship, which seemed to grow larger with every passing second. We've lost most of our forward cannons, Lieutenant Martinez replied, his voice tight with tension. We still have the rear plasma turrets, but they won't be enough to breach their shields. Then we'll have to make them count, Turner said as he gripped the armrest of his chair with white knuckles. Prepare the remaining turrets and get us back on course. Sir, Hayes hesitated, her eyes darting to the emergency system readouts. We won't be able to make it back to the flagship, not in this condition. I didn't ask for your opinion, Commander. I gave you an order. Turner's voice was like steel as he locked eyes with her. Get us to that ship now. The crew worked in a frantic blur, the Vanguard groaning under the strain of the damage, but they knew what had to be done. They were running out of time, and Earth's fate was hanging by a thread with each passing second. 5 minutes until we're within range of their flagship, Hayes said, her voice steady, but edged with fear. After that, we'll be sitting ducks. We don't have 5 minutes, Turner replied, his voice a low growl. We need to make them come to us. He turned to Martins, his eyes burning with determination. Prepare the rear turrets for a concentrated barrage. We'll give them everything we've got and force them to come after us. Aye, sir, Martinez said with a nod, his fingers moving across the controls as the rear turrets powered up. Captain, Hayes called out again. If we do this, they'll have us in their sights the moment we fire, and we won't last long enough to get close enough for a direct assault. We don't have a choice, Turner said, his jaw clenched as he stared at the viewscreen, the Zarnak's flagship looming larger with every passing second. Fire the turrets now. The Vanguard fired everything. It had left a series of powerful plasma beams shot toward the Zarnak ship, streaking through space in a blaze of light. But even as the blasts hit the flagship's shields, they barely registered. The Zarnak ship barely flinched. Instead, it returned fire with a terrifyingly accurate volley that struck the Vanguard dead center. The ship jolted as the beam cut through their hull, tearing into the heart of the Vanguard and sending shockwaves throughout the ship. Emergency alarms blared as sections of the ship went dark and fires broke out all over the decks. The crew was thrown from their stations as the ship was shaken to its core. Turner struggled to stay on his feet, his body battered from the impact as the entire ship groaned under the weight of the damage. "Commander," he rasped as he reached for his communicator. "We've got one shot left. And we're taking it." "I know," Hayes replied, her voice cold and focused. "We're going in." The Vanguard shuddered once more as the last of its systems struggled to stay online. The ship was a broken shell of what it had been moments ago, its hull scared and its weapons disabled. But the crew held on, their faces etched with determination and fear. The Zarnak's flagship was now just moments away, and they had no choice but to push forward or watch everything they had fought for crumble into dust. "Do it now," Turner commanded, his voice barely audible over the groaning of the ship's damaged framework. As he steadied himself in the captain's chair, the last of their power reserves had been rerouted to the engines. They would have just enough speed to close the gap and reach the Zarnak's flagship, but they would be sitting ducks for the enemy's guns if they didn't act quickly. The crew moved as one in a frantic blur, their hands moving like lightning across controls. But everything was strained. The ship was falling apart around them, and they knew it was only a matter of time before the Vanguard was reduced to nothing more than a floating wreckage. "We're coming up on the flagship now," Hayes said, her voice tight with urgency as she glanced at the view screen where the Zarnak ship loomed ahead, its jagged silhouette bathed in cold starlight. Full throttle. Turner snapped, his teeth clenched as the Vanguard surged forward, its engines screaming in protest at the strain. "We're going to ram them." "But sir," Hayes began to protest, but she knew there was no time for hesitation, no other option. They had to get close enough to board or destroy the flagship in a single strike, or Earth would fall. "We'll have no second chance," Turner said, the weight of the moment pressing down on him like an iron fist. "If we don't do this now, we'll never have the chance again." The Vanguard surged toward the Zarnak's flagship, its battered hull groaning as it pushed forward with what little strength it had left. But the Zarnak ship wasn't oblivious to their plan. It began to fire relentlessly, throwing massive energy beams toward the Vanguard in a desperate attempt to keep them at bay. One beam hit the Vanguard's lower hull, and the ship buckled under the impact, sending sparks flying through the bridge and tearing open the lower decks. "We've lost power to the aft thrusters," Martin shouted from his station. "We won't be able to get enough speed to close the distance." "We don't need speed," Turner said, his eyes narrowing with steely resolve. "We need precision." He gripped the edge of the captain's chair as the ship continued to lurch violently under the assault from the Zarnak's flagship. But they couldn't slow down now. The Vanguard was already committed to the attack, and the fate of humanity rested on this final gamble. "Prepare for impact," Turner ordered, his voice cutting through the chaos. "We're going straight in." As the Vanguard neared the flagship, a final barrage of plasma beams from the Zarnak's flagship lit up the sky in a dazzling array of deadly light. The Vanguard shields flared one last time before failing completely. The ship lurched as a beam hit directly beneath the bridge, the explosion shaking the entire vessel. But Turner stood firm. "Now," Turner roared as the Vanguard crashed into the Zarnak's flagship, its hull ripping through the alien ship's surface as the impact shook both vessels to their core, and the crew braced themselves for the inevitable explosion that would follow. But as the smoke and debris cleared, the Vanguard had made its mark. The Zarnak's flagship had been breached, and there was no turning back now. The battle had begun in earnest, and the fate of Earth hung in the balance. The Vanguard groaned as it embedded itself in the side of the Zarnak's flagship, its hull cracking and tearing as it pushed deeper into the alien ship. The bridge was shaken by the impact, and the lights flickered in and out of existence. But Turner stood firm, gripping the chair as the shaking subsided. "Status report," he barked, his voice steady but strained. "We've breached their outer hull," Hayes said as she wiped blood from a cut on her forehead. "But we've lost all power to forward systems, and we're losing life support in sections B and C." "We can't stop now," Turner said, his eyes locked on the breach in the view screen where fire and smoke billowed out into the vacuum of space. "We need to board their ship now while they're disoriented." The crew moved quickly through the wrecked bridge, scrambling to assist in whatever they could as the battle outside raged on the Zarnak's flagship had been hit hard, but it was far from disabled. Its weapons still fired with deadly precision, and its shields were holding strong. "We've got incoming," Martinez called out, his voice tense, as the Zarnak's flagship returned fire, sending a volley of plasma beams toward the Vanguard. His ship shuddered as the beams hit, but the damage was less severe this time. "Get us into the breach," Turner ordered, his eyes blazing with determination. "Once we're inside, we need to disable their central command, or this is all for nothing." The crew made their way through the crumbling ship to the breach site, where the Vanguard had torn through the Zarnak's flagship. The air was thick with smoke and debris, but there was no time to waste as they made their way into the enemy ship. "Stay sharp," Turner warned, as they moved through the dark corridors of the Zarnak's vessel. The walls were covered in strange symbols, and the air was cold and sterile. "We don't know what kind of resistance we'll face." As they moved deeper into the heart of the ship, the silence was deafening save for the distant hum of alien machinery that seemed to pulse with an eerie rhythm. The crew encountered no resistance at first, but as they moved closer to the central command area, things began to change. The alien ship seemed alive, its corridors shifting as though the walls themselves were closing in around them. "Admiral," Hayes said, her voice low and tense, "this place is alive. It's like they're anticipating our movements." Turner's eyes narrowed as he scanned their surroundings. "Stay focused. We need to get to their command center." Suddenly, the walls lit up with red lights, and a series of heavy footsteps echoed through the corridor ahead of them, the sound growing louder with every passing second. "They're coming," Martinez said in a whisper as he readied his weapon. The crew quickly took cover as alien soldiers appeared from the shadows, their weapons aimed directly at the humans who had dared to infiltrate their ship. Turner's pulse quickened as he signaled his team to hold their ground, but the Zarnak soldiers didn't hesitate to open fire, their energy weapons crackling in the air. "Return fire," Turner shouted as the crew opened fire, sending blasts of energy toward the Zarnak soldiers, but they moved with terrifying speed, their shields deflecting most of the shots as they closed in on the humans. "We need to move," Hayes yelled as she grabbed Turner's arm and pulled him toward a nearby doorway. "The command center is just ahead. We can't fight them all." "Go," Turner shouted as they pushed forward into the heart of the Zarnak's flagship, knowing that the only way to win was to reach the heart of the enemy ship and disable their control center once and for all. The battle raged around them as the crew of the Vanguard fought their way deeper into the heart of the Zarnak's flagship. The air was thick with the scent of burning metal and acrid smoke. The distant hum of alien machinery filled the corridors, and the flashing red lights bathed the entire ship in an ominous glow. Turner's heart pounded in his chest as he sprinted alongside Hayes, each step taking them closer to the enemy's command center. The sound of alien footsteps echoed behind them, growing louder as the Zarnak soldiers pursued them without hesitation. "Keep moving," Turner barked as he turned a corner and shoved open a large reinforced door. The team poured into the room, their weapons raised and ready, but the room was empty save for the blinking control panels that lined the walls. "This is it," Hayes said, her voice filled with disbelief as she looked around the command center, its sleek metallic walls, a stark contrast to the organic nature of the rest of the Zarnak ship. "We've made it." Turner nodded, his gaze fixed on the central console, where a complex array of alien symbols flashed across the screen. "We need to disable their command and communication systems," he said as he approached the control panel, his fingers moving across the surface in a series of rapid movements. "We'll never figure this out in time," Martinez said, his voice strained as he checked their perimeter. "We need to take down their shields first, or we'll be blasted out of here in seconds." "I'm working on it," Turner replied as he focused intently on the alien system, the console humming to life beneath his touch. Just keep them off us, for as long as you can." As Turner continued to input commands, the door behind them burst open with a deafening roar, and Zarnak soldiers flooded into the room, their weapons raised and their eyes filled with deadly intent. "They'd found us," Hayes shouted as she fired her weapon into the approaching aliens, taking down the first few before they could return fire. The Vanguard's crew held their ground, firing rapidly to keep the Zarnak soldiers at bay, but the sheer numbers of the enemy were overwhelming, their shots barely piercing the Zarnak shields. "They're pushing us back," Martinez grunted as he ducked behind a console and returned fire. "We can't hold them off much longer." "Don't stop," Turner shouted as he worked faster, his fingers flying over the alien interface. "If we don't disable their systems now, we'll never get another chance." The room shook violently as the Zarnak's flagship's weapons fired once more, blasting a chunk of the wall away and sending debris scattering across the floor. Turner barely flinched as the console in front of him began to spark and buzz. "Almost there," he muttered through gritted teeth. "Just a little more." But the Zarnak soldiers were relentless, pushing closer with every passing second, their weapons crackling with deadly energy. Hayes and Martinez fought to hold the line, but they were starting to falter. The crew was exhausted, and their ammunition was running low. "I can't hold them off forever," Hayes shouted over the din of battle as another soldier charged at her with a brutal-looking blade. "We need to finish this now." Turner's breath came in ragged gasps as he keyed in the final sequence on the console, his fingers trembling with the effort. "Done," he said hoarsely as the alien system shut down with a series of beeps and whirs. A wave of energy rippled through the Zarnak's flagship as its systems began to fail one by one. Lights flickered, and the hum of the machinery died down as the central core lost power. "We did it," Hayes said, her voice filled with disbelief. But as the lights went dark and the room fell into eerie silence, Turner knew it wasn't over yet. The Zarnaks weren't finished, and they would fight to the bitter end. But now they had the advantage. The tables had turned, and the Vanguard's crew had a fighting chance to finish what they had started. The silence in the command center was deafening. The only sound was the hum of the failing systems and the distant groans of the ship's fractured structure. Turner stood frozen for a moment, his breath heavy in his chest, his eyes locked on the now dimmed control panels that had once been the beating heart of the Zarnak's flagship. It was hard to believe they had succeeded. The odds had seemed impossible, but they had managed to disable the enemy's core systems. "Admiral," Hayes said, her voice low and filled with urgency, "we need to move fast before they recover from this." Turner didn't respond at first. He was still processing the fact that they had actually done it. They had breached the Zarnak's flagship and taken down its central command system. But the battle was far from over. They had only bought themselves time, not a victory, and that time was quickly running out. "Move out," Turner commanded, his voice steady as he turned to lead the crew through the dimly lit corridors of the Zarnak's flagship. Their mission was far from complete. They had to find a way to destroy the flagship from within before the Zarnaks could regroup and retaliate. The crew moved swiftly through the wreckage of the ship, their path illuminated only by the flickering emergency lights as they made their way toward the core reactor of the Zarnak ship, the heart of their power and their last line of defense. "We're almost there," Turner said as he pushed forward, the tension in his voice growing. "We're not alone," Martinez said suddenly, his voice a sharp whisper as he stopped in his tracks and peered down the hallway ahead. The crew tensed, their weapons raised as figures appeared from the shadows. The Zarnak soldiers were back, and they had clearly recovered faster than expected. Their glowing eyes narrowed with hatred as they advanced toward the humans. "This is it," Hayes muttered as she took a defensive position behind a wall. "We fight here, or we die trying." Turner's mind raced as he looked at the soldiers closing in on them, but he knew they didn't have the luxury of time to waste on a drawn-out fight. "We push through," he said firmly. "Stay tight, we move fast." With a roar, the battle erupted once more, the Vanguard's crew fighting with every ounce of strength they had left, their shots finding their targets as the Zarnak soldiers retaliated with brutal force, the alien weapons crackling with energy as they fired back. Turner moved with precision, his blaster sending out powerful beams. As he took down two of the soldiers who had gotten too close, Hayes and Martinez were right behind him, each shot fired with deadly accuracy. But the Zarnak soldiers were relentless, and the crew was beginning to feel the strain. "Keep moving," Turner shouted as he sprinted down the hallway toward the reactor chamber ahead, the rest of the crew following close behind. But the Zarnak soldiers were gaining ground, their attacks pushing the humans back with each step they took. "We're not going to make it," Martinez said between gritted teeth as he ducked behind cover and fired once more. "We don't have a choice," Turner snapped as he fired off another shot, taking down an incoming soldier. "We're getting to that reactor or this is all for nothing." The crew pushed forward with renewed determination, their bodies bruised and exhausted, but they refused to give up. They had come too far to turn back now, and the fate of Earth depended on their success. As they neared the reactor chamber, the Zarnak soldiers finally seemed to retreat, but Turner knew it was a temporary measure. The enemy would regroup and come after them in full force the moment they realized what was happening. "Prepare to breach," Turner ordered as the crew reached the reactor door, its massive metallic surface standing between them and the destruction of the Zarnak's flagship, their final chance to end the war before it consumed everything they had fought for. The door to the reactor chamber loomed before them, a massive steel barrier covered in strange symbols, the only thing standing between the crew of the Vanguard and the core of the Zarnak's flagship. Its destruction would take down the entire vessel and cripple the Zarnak's war machine once and for all, but getting to it would be no easy feat. Turner took a deep breath as he approached the door, his mind racing with the possibilities. Their window of opportunity was closing fast, and they needed to act now before the Zarnak's forces could mobilize again. "We breach on my mark," he said, his voice steady, despite the chaos around them. The crew gathered in position, their weapons raised and ready as they prepared for the final assault. The door was heavily reinforced, but the Vanguard's crew had come too far to let a locked door stand between them and victory. "Ready," Turner said, looking at Hayes, Martinez, and the rest of the team. "Ready," they all replied, their voices taut with the pressure of the moment. "Breach," Turner commanded, and without hesitation, Hayes planted the charge on the door's central lock. The explosion was deafening as the charge detonated, sending shards of metal flying in all directions. The door gave way with a resounding crack, and the crew rushed forward into the reactor chamber. The room was a massive cylindrical space, pulsating with energy, the core of the Zarnak's flagship glowing an eerie green as it fed the entire ship its power and life force. "We need to plant the charges at the core's base," Turner shouted over the hum of the reactor, the crew fanning out and taking their positions as the glowing power of the Zarnak's reactor filled the chamber. But as they moved toward the core, the Zarnak's forces were already closing in. The sound of heavy footsteps echoed from the chamber's entrance, and Turner knew that their window of opportunity was rapidly shrinking. "Move faster," he shouted as he sprinted toward the core. "We're under fire," Martinez called out as he opened fire at a group of approaching Zarnak soldiers, but their shields absorbed most of the blasts, leaving only a few to drop. Turner reached the reactor's base and began planting the explosive charges, his hands moving with precision as he attached the devices to the massive core, but the Zarnak soldiers were closing in fast. "We're running out of time," Hayes shouted as she covered him, firing into the oncoming enemy troops. "We're almost there," Turner replied, gritting his teeth as he secured the final charge on the core, the explosive device locking into place with a satisfying click. "Charges are set," he shouted as he turned toward the crew. "Fall back, we need to get out of here now." But the Zarnak soldiers had reached the chamber's entrance, and they were ready for a final stand. The crew was pinned down as the enemy advanced with relentless force, their weapons crackling with energy. "We need to get to the exit, or we won't make it out alive," Hayes said, her voice edged with panic. Turner nodded, his gaze fixed on the timer that was now counting down from 3 minutes. "We have to hold them off just a little longer," he said through clenched teeth. "We can't let them disable the charges." The battle raged one final time as the crew of the Vanguard held their ground, fighting with everything they had left. The Zarnak soldiers were relentless, But so were they. The explosive charge at the reactor's base was their last hope, and if they could hold off the enemy just long enough, it would be the end of the Zarnax war. The timer on Turner's wrist flickered down to its final seconds, and with one last defiant push, the Vanguard crew broke through the oncoming fire and sprinted toward the exit, the explosion behind them erupting with the force of 1,000 suns as the Zarnax flagship shattered into pieces. In that moment, the battle was won and Earth had been saved, but Turner knew the cost would be felt for years to come. The war was far from over, but humanity had shown it would never back down in the face of overwhelming odds.